When people think of the most iconic games of the 8-bit era, a series that will inevitably come up in conversation is Castlevania. With its horror theme and tough-as-nails gameplay, the Castlevania series really became a topic of conversation on the playground and beyond. It stood out from many other games at the time that were going for more of that cute and quirky approach. Obviously, Sega was very interested in having a Castlevania of their own on the Master System, but Nintendo required developers to enter into an exclusivity contract with them in order to make games for their console back then, so Konami was not able to do this. Sega took things into their own hands, of course, and decided to have their own version of Castlevania, the result being Master of Darkness. Does this game drive a stake into the heart of a vampire with the badassery of a Belmont, or is it a pain in the neck that sucks? Sorry to be a pain in your neck real quick, but did you know you can support independent content like this over at patreon.com/idreamofindiegames? Gain Discord access, exclusive live streams, and so much more. Your community is waiting for you. Right then, so Master of Darkness. This game was developed by Sims and published by Sega. Master of Darkness first released on the Game Gear in Japan in 1992, and then in the US and Europe in 93. Then it also received a release on the Master System in Europe and Brazil that same year. Because the Game Gear is essentially a portable Master System, the two versions are pretty much the same. Players will control Dr. Social, an expert on the supernatural, who begins investigating a series of murders in which victims have been drained of their blood. With the use of a Ouija board, he discovers something horrible is happening and sets out to investigate. His investigation leads him to discover that organized crime is having its strings pulled by a mysterious influence, and that the killer behind the murders he has been investigating has been gathering blood for someone else. The more he discovers, the more links he finds to the supernatural, and the goons and feral animals he first encounters as enemies are replaced by ghosts and the undead as he gets further into this investigation. His worst fears are finally confirmed when he finds out that vampires have been behind all of these strange and gruesome crimes, and he takes it upon himself to stop them as he is one of the few people with the knowledge and ability to do so. Dr. Social begins with just a knife that does low damage, and he has a short-range attack as well, but weapon upgrades will be available in each level. There's also a sword that has a longer range and does more damage than the knife. There's a cane with the same range as the sword, but that does even more damage, and an axe with a range that is halfway between the knife and the sword, but really does massive damage and can one-shot any regular enemy in the game. It'll do at least an entire health orb of damage to every boss in the game as well. Bosses don't really have a ton of health orbs, so getting good at using the axe will be pretty useful against them. Sub-weapons will also be available, and as it was in the early Castlevania games, these are used by pressing the attack button while holding up on the D-pad. You'll be able to obtain a gun, a boomerang, bombs, and sharpened wooden stakes thrown as projectiles. The gun is the weakest of these, but ammunition is plentiful. It is fast, and it is very useful against aggressive enemies with low HP, like the bats that will attempt to swarm you. The boomerang is useful against flying enemies who fly in patterns because it has 2 chances to hit when sending and returning the weapon. Bombs are used to throw at enemies located on platforms above you, and the stakes are rare but are the most powerful of the sub-weapons and give a ranged attack that does as much damage as the axe. There are 5 levels in the game total that each have multiple stages, and each level will end with a boss encounter followed by a cutscene showing what Dr. Social has learned in his investigation. They will also show the next location it leads him to. While each level consists of a single general area, some stages may take place in a different part of that area. These can range from docks and back alleys to a haunted wax museum and the catacombs beneath it, to a graveyard that leads to a church full of the undead. With the types of enemies you will encounter and the environments you'll explore, Master of Darkness has a very similar feel to Hammer horror films. The enemies in the game can range from gangsters, vicious dogs, bats, ghosts, armed skeletons, and zombies. As is the case with Castlevania, there is a knockback when you are hit, and the enemies who fly or come charging at you quickly will aggressively try to knock you off of a platform. In most cases, this will result in death, but if the screen you are on has stairs leading to a lower screen, then falling can be another way to reach that screen, and sometimes falling can land you in an area inaccessible by stairs where you might find a rare item like an extra life. Rather than candlesticks, items are found in floating masts that can be broken with an attack. It's important to be careful when hitting the mass because some of them will have something negative, like replacing a powerful weapon with the weak knife that you start with, or giving you a sub-weapon that you don't want at the time. So while the game does troll the player with some item drops from the masks, it isn't flat out cruel in doing so. Upon death, you'll start at the beginning of the stage with only your starting knife available as a weapon. While this can be difficult in later levels because a lot of enemies will be damage sponges with such a weak weapon, a weapon upgrade will be located fairly early in a stage so you won't won't be stuck with the knife for long. As with Castlevania, you can get healing items that are hidden in destroyable walls, so checking walls frequently can help in keeping your HP up. While taking a vampire's drugs hidden in a wall sounds as suspect as eating turkey found in the wall of a vampire's castle, it still heals you with no negative side effects, and that's just part of the joy of video games, isn't it? The visual presentation of the game is very good, and the quality of the graphics is even slightly better than an 8-bit Castlevania due to the Master System having a stronger video chip than the NES. The designs of the enemies are well done, and the environments are fitting and memorable. The backgrounds in the museum level are particularly great. When it comes to music, Master of Darkness takes a different approach, and rather than having the energetic feel of a Castlevania soundtrack, it tries to create an eerie mood. While it doesn't have iconic standout tracks like you'll find in Castlevania, say Bloody Tears for example, the music is quite good and creates a unique atmosphere. When it comes to the controls, it fits into that stiff 8-bit Classicvania feel. While you can't jump onto stairs, you can jump off of them, and this makes it much easier to fight enemies while traversing. The variety of main and sub-weapons gives a versatility to the gameplay where you can choose a weapon that is best for how you want to fight certain enemies. Master of Darkness is fairly difficult, but not as brutal as something like Castlevania 3 Dracula's Curse. Learning each level will help in knowing how to deal with enemies, and wandering from the main path will generally lead to a powerful weapon or useful item. Enemies respawn in each screen, and some of them will respawn with proximity triggers, so be careful to avoid accidentally causing a flying enemy to respawn because it will come charging at you. Overall, Master of Darkness manages to recreate the appeal of Castlevania while doing things in a way that gives it an identity of its own. A few years after its release, Nintendo dropped the exclusivity contracts, and Konami was able to bring Castlevania to a Sega console in the form of Castlevania Bloodlines on the Genesis. Perhaps it was because of this that Sega didn't continue with Master of Darkness to make it a series, but it is interesting to contemplate what direction it would have taken if it had continued. As it stands, Master of Darkness is a satisfying game in the Classicvania style that will likely appeal to fans of 8-bit Castlevanias.